Welcome, everyone. I think that we're live right now. I hope we are. Happy Friday, Marlo in the making. Nice to see you. I'm very excited for our first episode of Musicians and Astrology. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about the stars. Get it? The stars behind our favorite musicians, our favorite music. And today we're going to be talking first, of course, about Tracy Chapman. Yes. Hello. Hello, Marlo. Nice to see you. I'm excited to catch you live as well. Welcome to the first episode of Musicians and Astrology. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about the stars behind our favorite music. And of course, we're going to start with Tracy Chapman because she's an Aries. And we always do things in astrological order. Hey, Sin, nice to see you. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for joining me. This is such a big deal. I'm flattered that you're here, Tracy Chapman Online. That is so wonderful. I hope you enjoy this episode. Obviously, you love Tracy just as much as I do, and we're going to celebrate her today. And we're going to learn more about her, and we're going to be able to enjoy her music even more than we do already, just because we're going to understand her a little bit better, or as much as possible. So when we're talking about Tracy, we know that she was born on March 30th, 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio, and her time of birth, unfortunately, is unknown. If we ever do get her time of birth, definitely let me know if anybody knows that. It's not Tracy behind this account. We're a fan community. That's fine. Still, I mean, it's still wonderful, and I'm really, really flattered. So, thank you for joining. Hey, Carlin, nice to see you. Good morning. So we know that she was born on March 30th, 1964 in Cleveland, but we don't know her time of birth, which is a shame. But we can still glean a lot of information about her chart. We know her sun sign. Her sun sign is Aries, and the sun sign in astrology pertains to authority, confidence, consciousness, creativity, ego, father, personal identity, physical vitality, self-expression, spine. And if you think about it, that really is what, with your sun sign, that's like your spine. Like, what do you stand for, right? So that's important. Vitality and well-being. And we know that Tracy is an Aries. Now, according to Rav Berg, whose book Kabbalistic Astrology is really, really excellent, he's pretty curt in his descriptions, but I think that they're quite interesting. He says with Aries, under the influence of Mars, the planet of war, Aries are courageous, even daring. Unafraid of confrontation, they have a tendency to seek it out. Danger has no meaning to them. They are quick and direct, but can be burdened by inflexibility and a lack of diplomacy. As a fire sign, their tempers tend to flare easily. So, that is the case with Aries, right? But it's really interesting. If the sun sign is an Aries, right? The person is action-oriented, passionate, bold, a risk taker, confident, determined, direct, and straightforward, brave, impatient, and impulsive. Thank you, Carlin. I know. I'm excited to see that too. Definitely. Thank you. So yeah, that's her. That's the Aries energy. But what got me into really finding out more, wanting to find out more about Tracy Chapman, and I was thinking that she's not very Aries at all. Like these traits are not what I would guess would be very Aries, and certainly not this, lacking diplomacy. If we've seen Tracy in interviews, she's so controlled, anything but confrontational, and she just seems very, very contained and very controlled, not very Aries at all. So that's why I wanted to do this deep dive. And not just me, but other people will also say that she is very, very shy. In an interview with Stephen Evans in talking about Tracy Chapman, this is a podcast that you can find on Apple, on Spotify. It's really, really great with Stephen Evans. He interviewed this guy by the name of Matt, who did the album art for the Fast Car album, as well as directed the video. And he said, when talking about Tracy, she was very shy and absolutely gorgeous, which is very Aries. Aries typically can be very beautiful. I just remember I could tell she was like strong, physically strong, but she was very shy. And that physical strength is very, very Aries, so that makes sense. But the shyness, again, it raises questions because Aries are not typically shy. He further said, I just got from her a very internal reserve power that just filled up the whole theater. It was just extraordinary. Now, that internal reserve power, I always see as Scorpio. And we'll look and see how that features in her chart, because it does it does show that she is a Scorpio moon, which we're going to talk about. Because we have to look at the whole chart, right? We can't just say, okay, Tracy's an Aries and you know, she's pugnacious, or Tracy's even a Scorpio moon and she's dark and brooding. You have to consider the whole chart. When we're talking about astrology, we usually speak about the big three, right? You got the sun sign, which is the sign you look up when you're looking at your horoscope. It's the self, one's ego, what makes one individual and unique. Then you have the moon, which is the subconscious, the unseen things within us that dictate our actions. And then you have your ascendant, which is your mask or persona, how you come across to others on a very first impression basis. Hi, nice to meet you. That is what people see with your ascendant. Oh, that's really, really interesting, Sin. I saw her, Tracy, on one of those talk shows when she was getting started. She was quite a fascinating person and a hard worker. Yes, very fascinating and a very hard worker, which we'll see. So these are the big three that we usually look at in astrology. And it's important also to look at the other aspects and also the other planets. You got to consider the whole chart. But in terms of Tracy's big three, we know that she's an Aries, but the degree of Aries changed on March 30th. And we don't know whether or not she's 9 or 10 degrees Aries. That's okay. We do know that she's a Scorpio moon, but because the moon, you know, we don't know her time of birth. We don't know where exactly the Scorpio moon is, meaning what degree it's in. But luckily, we do know her moon is in Scorpio. Sometimes the moon changes signs throughout the day, which is terrible for astrologers, because then you have to make a guess. Okay, is this person a Scorpio moon or a Libra moon? But at least with Tracy, the moon was in Scorpio all day on her birthday. And unfortunately, we don't know her ascendant. But I have suspicions. I'll ask you what you all think. We do know, thankfully, that her moon is in Scorpio. Now, when we're talking about the moon in astrology, we're talking about childhood, we're talking about conditioning, emotions, habits, instincts, memory, moods, mother, whereas the father is indicated by the sun in astrology, security, and the subconscious. And when we're talking about Scorpio, we're talking about passionate, determined, strategic, loyal, bold, creative, very creative Scorpios are, brooding, mysterious, intense, and obsessive. So we can put this together and say, okay, well, her emotions are intense, or her mother was bold, stuff like that. So we can understand a little bit more about Tracy by knowing her moon sign, and that makes things a lot more sense, right? Because Aries is a fire sign and Scorpio is a water sign. So when the two come together, the water might put out the fire, right? So that might dampen her Aries nature, which makes a lot of sense. Additionally, we also know, because she has a Scorpio moon, that her sun and moon quincunx. Now, we don't know for sure because we don't know the degree of her Scorpio moon, but I think it makes sense, and we're just going to roll with it. We're going to say that her sun and moon probably quincunx. So what is a quincunx? A quincunx, also called an inconjunct, occurs when two planets are 150 degrees or 5 signs apart. So when we're talking about a quincunx, it's a little bit of an awkward aspect. The quincunx, it's when two zodiac signs are in different elements as well as different modalities. So with Tracy, we can guess that because she has her sun in Aries and her moon in Scorpio, Aries and Scorpio have nothing in common, right? So they have different modalities, meaning Scorpio is fixed and it's a water sign, and Aries is cardinal and it's a fire sign. So they have nothing in common, Aries and Scorpio. So when you have a configuration like this in your chart, something does not compute. The native must reconcile the irreconcilable, requiring a creative leap to blend the two sets of needs and traits. There also may be a nameless apprehension. One may feel unable to relax and find harmony in relationships, which may cause stress and anxiety. As they say, tough life, good art. They actually say bad life, good art, but I don't think Tracy has a bad life at all, actually. I think she's enjoying herself. I think she's in the San Francisco area, loving the beach and loving the woods. But yeah, in relationships, the native may offer too much to a person when you have this quincunx, and they may feel like they're being taken advantage of, which could possibly be if we look at Tracy's songs. Again, like not all of the songs are autobiographical, but still, that's really an interesting tidbit about how with quincunxes, the native can feel like they're giving too much and being taken advantage of. You may want to see whether or not you have a quincunx in your chart if you find that's the paradigm that you experience a lot in your relationships. So she also may have a yod. She may have a yod, but again, we're not quite sure because that moon could be between 3 and 15 degrees Scorpio, but I believe it's very likely she has a yod in her chart, aka finger of God. So the finger of God, the apex of the yod is where we're pointing. It's saying go there, and the yod is really, really interesting. It's a isosceles triangle. And if we notice over here, you got Pluto in Virgo, and that is making a harmonious sextile to the moon in Scorpio. But then we get a quincunx. We get two quincunxes because Pluto and Aries have nothing in common. Pluto in Virgo. Virgo has nothing in common with Aries. And also Scorpio has nothing in common with Aries. So that's what a a yod is, or a finger of God. It's an aspect pattern that's an isosceles triangle made of two planets in sextile, in her case, Virgo and Scorpio. And both of them form an uncomfortable 150-degree quincunx or inconjunct angle to a third planet, which in Tracy's case will be Aries, because Virgo has nothing in common with Aries and Scorpio has nothing in common with Aries. The only thing Scorpio has in common with Aries is Mars, really, because the traditional ruler of Scorpio is Aries. Traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars. Hey, Common gave you. Nice to see you. So yeah, it looks like she has a finger of God. With this configuration, the sextile planets form an easy angle, but both are in a challenging quincunx to the planet of the apex of the yod, in Tracy's case, Aries. So there's like this friction and a need for adjustment, and that apex, that Aries energy, interrupts the ease and flow between the two sextile planets. So Virgo and Scorpio can really get along well, but it's interrupted by that Aries. So then you have a yod. So what does a yod indicate? Now, you can tell me if you think this makes a lot of sense in regard to Tracy. I think it does. Yod means hand. That's why it's called the hand of God or the hand of fate. And the role of a yod in someone's chart is to break ancestral patterns. Now, I find this super interesting because if we think of Tracy's song Fast Car, right? She speaks about the song, and I'm quoting Tracy here, At the time that I wrote the song, I actually didn't really know who I was writing about. Looking back at it, I think that it was a song about my parents and about how when they met each other, they were very young and they wanted to start a new life together. And my mother was anxious to leave home. My parents got married and went out into the world to try to make a place for themselves, and it was very difficult going. So I wonder, with this, the role of the yod bearer is to break ancestral patterns. I wonder if in Tracy writing that song that she healed the karma of perhaps, the difficulty that is depicted in the song Fast Car. Something to think about. The yod also can indicate stress, anxiety, uneasiness, and restlessness, along with a feeling of being lost or depressed or stuck and hopeless. A yod also indicates a person or event that has a strong, powerful, and mystical forces. Now, when I think of Tracy and I see her either performing or an interview, there is a mysticism I see about her, which would indicate to me that she probably does have a yod. The yod also brings with it great potential, increased awareness of yourself and your surroundings, and opens the door for possible spiritual evolution, which again makes a lot of sense because she seems just so centered and so together and so humble. So that makes a lot of sense, right? A yod also may predict arriving at a fork in the road and having to proceed in one direction rather than another without knowing where it will lead. Now, Tracy always wanted to be a vet. That's what she wanted to be, like from early on in her life. She dressed as a vet for Halloween. She went to Tufts to be a vet. And then she did wind up switching her major to African studies and anthropology. But then her friend noticed that she was a really talented musician, and her friend's father got her a record deal. And the rest, as they say, is history. So that makes a lot of sense, right? With that fork in the road. And she probably didn't know where it would lead, but it worked for her, obviously. So she may have a yod. I think that she does, which is pretty awesome. We also know that Tracy Chapman was born under a waning GLIBBOUS moon. So this is the moon cycle that's just after the full moon, and it lasts until the third quarter. So these natives are, they focus on analysis, introspection, and understanding their own motivations and desires. And again, this also sort of tones down the Aries energy because Aries energy is very active. It's very outward, external. But people with this moon, they're more introspective. They don't get excited as quickly as those around them. Again, this refutes or dampens the Aries energy, and they use more of their conscience, value system, and beliefs when making a decision. They're often the wise one in the group. They're sage-like with an artistic, reserved, and restrained nature. So that makes a lot of sense, right? Also, we know that Tracy's chart is seesaw-shaped. It's like a seesaw with lots of planets on the top and lots of planets on the bottom, nothing really in the middle. So that's cool. So we see in a seesaw shape, the planets are distributed in two clusters opposite each other, right? So if you notice over here, they're up here and then they're down here. And Tracy at one point said, I decided to do whatever I could to make sure the business side of music didn't intrude on the creative part. And that separation between two elements in somebody's life is very reminiscent of a C-shaped chart. So when you see a seesaw-shaped chart, all planets, as we said, are distributed in two clusters opposite each other, right? It indicates objectivity, deliberation, and a desire to be fair. And again, that also really refutes or at least dampens the Aries energy. A seesaw-shaped chart is related to life bipolarity. There's a tendency with a seesaw-shaped chart to disconnect and live two lives. They may predominantly identify with the energies of only one half of the seesaw. And then they find their other half or their other eye through their relationships, intensifying the need for relationships. So like she'll identify, or the subject, whoever has a seesaw shaped chart, they usually will identify with either the top or the bottom, and then they find relationships in which they're connecting with their unlived self or their other I, right? And that would also make sense why so many of Tracy's songs are about love, right? So she's very, very connected to relationships, which makes a lot of sense with a seesaw shaped chart. Other personal planets that that Tracy has in her chart that I want to talk about. She has Mercury in Aries, makes her a quick decision maker, instant gratification, direct, candid, which others may see as rude. Again, I don't think that's very Tracy. The natives are also personally attached to their ideas. So Aries is the house of self, right? So and Mercury is the planet of communication. So they're very, very focused on their ideas, which would make sense. Now, this makes real sense. The Venus in Taurus for Tracy, love centers on physical contact and comforts. I'm not quite sure about that, but other aspects do, in terms of her personality, do point to Venus in Taurus. There is a desire for predictability and dependability when you have Venus in Taurus, and you are possessive in love and threatened by high energy situations. I do think that makes a lot of sense in terms of Tracy, just because the atmosphere around her, whenever I've seen her in concert or in interviews, very, very calm, very, very Taurus. She also has Mars in Aries, which is the planet of rulership. And people with Mars in Aries, they take action and they don't know how to stop and smell the roses, which again, I'm guessing that that's not very Tracy, because she seems like she is able to relax. Mars and Aries people have quick flare-ups, but their anger usually doesn't last. They might get upset easily, but they chill out pretty quickly. They are impulsive and they have trouble seeing things through. Aries is a cardinal fire sign, so they might start something really, really fast, but then lose steam. And they have strong physical energy, which does make sense in terms of Aries, in terms of Tracy, as many people comment on her strong physicality. But my question is it possible that Tracy's chart ruler is Venus? Just because that would make her Venus in Taurus pop more in her personality. And that makes a lot more sense from where I stand. I think that she's very, very Taurus. And Taurus also rules music, which also makes sense. So there are other aspects in Tracy's chart that I want to talk about today. Maybe you have these aspects in your chart. In any case, you may find it fascinating how things might coincide, right? So her closest aspect is Uranus sextiling the North Node, 0-degree orb. When this happens in a chart, the planet of shock and sudden events, Uranus, harmoniously sextiles the North Node of destiny. And that makes so much sense for Tracy. She said at one point, I never assumed I would have that commercial success. So it was a total surprise. So Uranus is about surprise, but a sextile is harmonious. So it was a happy surprise, right? A happy surprise that she achieved so much success, not sex. Yeah, she could have, I believe, a Libra or a Taurus rising. That would make Venus the ruler of her chart, and Venus in Taurus, right? So that would predominate. That could be. I would be surprised if she had a Virgo rising, because that would make Mercury the ruler of her chart, and Mercury is in Aries, and I don't think that she's very Aries at all. So I'd be very surprised if she has an Aries ruler. But yeah, that's one aspect that makes a lot of sense. She also has Mercury, the planet of communication, conjuncting Jupiter, the expansion of the planet of expansion and luck. So when the planet of communication, Mercury, fuses with expansive Jupiter, words and ideas flow endlessly. And Tracy Chapman is incredibly prolific, right? She has written so many songs. A lot of these artists we don't realize, like we get their album, but there's so many songs that they created that never made it to the album. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of work to be done. She writes, or she said at one point, songwriting is a very mysterious process. It feels like creating something from nothing. It's something I don't feel like I really control. And that energy of not feeling like she's in control when she's writing, that also might be reminiscent of her Scorpio and Pluto together, which we're going to talk about. But it's sort of like, it sounds like she's a channeler. And with Mercury conjuncting Jupiter, she can create work really, really quickly. Aries, in the very nature of Aries, they're really good writers, typically. Might have to do with the fact that their ruling planet Mars rules sharp objects, and a pen is a sharp object. But yes, Aries are very, very good writers. And Mercury conjunct Jupiter in Aries, yeah, she's a great writer, obviously. And even before she wrote songs, or while she wrote songs, she also wrote poetry and short stories. And obviously, a lot of her songs, they tell a story. Also, Tracy has Neptune trine Chiron. So this is really interesting. Only a 1-degree orb, deep inner wombs, Chiron act as a springboard for showing the world creative, artistic, and intuitive talents, which is Neptune. So that makes so much sense for Tracy. In her song Telling Stories, the album Telling Stories, there's a song Telling Stories, and the lyric goes, there is a fiction in the space between the lines on your page of memories. And that makes so much sense with Neptune trine Chiron, because the work that she winds up doing, or the music she winds up creating, a lot of it might be fictionalized, but fiction is like the truth within the lie, right? And that makes a lot of sense that she would leverage her woundedness, right, to really gift the world with some beautiful, beautiful work. So yeah, she also has Jupiter, planet of expansion, making a harmonious sextile to Saturn, which is the planet of hard work and discipline. So Jupiter and Saturn are like opposites, right? Jupiter expands and Saturn restricts. Jupiter says, yes, give me more. And Saturn says, no, stop it, cut it out, calm yourself down, right? But these two planets are making a harmonious sextile. So happy-go-lucky Jupiter harmoniously sextiles School of Hard Knocks Saturn. And this gives the native a steady and balanced nature. And she said once, I'm a hopeful cynic, which is so Jupiter sextile Saturn. So Jupiter sextile Saturn. And you're right, Singe. You need a memory to write. And she obviously has a really good memory, and we'll see that further with the moon and Pluto aspect that she has, which makes her memories very, very intense, most likely. Oh, and here we go. Yeah, there we go. Talking about that, the moon sextiles Pluto in her chart. So with this, it's really interesting. One of the attributes of moon sextile Pluto is that the native is able to gather insights from the silence of whatever has not been expressed. And that reminded me of one of Tracy's really great songs, Baby Can I Hold You, from her 1988 album, Tracy Chapman. In the song, definitely listen to it if you have not already. But she says in the song, I love you is all that you can't say. Years gone by and still. Words don't come easily. Like I love you. I love you. So fascinating, right? In the song, she's essentially saying, talking about being in love with somebody who's unable to say these things that are so very important, but she still is able to pick them up, perhaps via moon sextile Pluto. She also has her moon sextiling Uranus. And really, with all these moon aspects, and again, we don't know for sure because the orb is so wide, because we don't know the time of her birth, but they make a lot of sense. Even, with so many moon aspects, that also would dull down the Aries aspects of her, and also make more prominent that Scorpio energy. And Tracy Chapman, to me, seems way more Scorpio than Aries. Let me know if you think so too. But with the moon sextile Uranus, the sensitive moon harmoniously sextiles Eureka, Uranus. That's what Uranus does. It wakes us up. It's like the alarm clock that goes off, and it can give us these insights. But when the moon is making the sextile to Uranus, it helps the native achieve insights emotionally. So essentially, they intuit or emotionally feel these eureka moments. It's almost like an emotional light bulb goes off in which they feel the surprise or the awareness emotionally. And that makes a lot of sense because she did spend a lot of time in the library. She even said that at one point. As a child, I spent a lot of time at the library, which makes a lot of sense, because she would be going through discovery, which you do at the library, privately, right? Yes, that's one of the reasons I love astrology. It is like being a detective. Definitely, Sin. Definitely. Additionally, her moon looks like it probably trines the north node. We're not sure of the orb, but we're guessing that it's 3 degrees thereabouts. Here, the natives' relationship with their mother, moon is mother, usually teaches them how to use their emotions constructively. And that makes so much sense because she says, growing up in Cleveland, I learned about singing from my mother, who had once sung professionally and who admired Mahalia Jackson and Aretha Franklin. So she did have that music energy all around her growing up, and her mother was very instrumental, and so was her sister. She actually used to give her sister all these songs that she wrote. She used to show her songs to her sister, and she wrote so many of them. And her older sister was incredibly encouraging, said, keep going, keep going, keep going. And it was obviously really helpful that her sister did that. Tracy also has Mercury sextiling Saturn. So Mercury is the planet of communication. A sextile is a harmonious aspect, and Saturn is discipline, hard work, right? Just like Sin, you had said earlier in an interview, she's quite a fascinating person and a hard worker. Well, there we go with that Mercury sextiling Saturn. The main influence of Mercury sextile Saturn is the single-minded drive to see a goal or plan executed to the very best of one's ability. And she says in a quote, there's a time and place for everything, and my focus is music. So that's what I prefer to spend most of my time doing and not talk about making music. Well, that's quite an Aries statement, very assertive. I think her Aries energy, or maybe even her Mercury in Aries, is coming out there. And, what I love about Tracy is that she is very independent in the fact that she's not on social media at all. She might get tagged in a photo here and there, but she doesn't want to do it. In fact, she thinks that it's just ridiculous that we have so many ways of communicating, but she doesn't feel like we're communicating more. And she doesn't, I don't believe she does have a smartphone, but she finds it difficult to make calls on it. Like the main purpose of a phone is to make calls. And she states how you can do everything on your phone except what you actually might need it for. So she really doesn't like social media and all of that. She wants to just focus on her work. So it's that single-mindedness, which is also actually an Aries trait, which makes a lot of sense. But Mercury sextile Saturn, she's keeping her eyes on the prize. She doesn't need to deal with nonsense. And she just focuses on her work. And she's probably loving life right now, really close to the woods and the beach and getting to write or do her own thing. And then she also has the sun squaring the north node. So this is a big deal, right? The native's mission often requires making a sacrifice with the sun square north node. The ego must be submerged to achieve something greater. Now, what's interesting is that she said at one point, one of the reasons I chose Tufts is that they have one of the best veterinary schools in the country. Since I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a veterinarian. So this is fascinating, right? She dressed it up as a vet for Halloween. She wanted to be a vet so bad. She goes to Tufts. She wound up not even studying. I think she started with biology at Tufts, and then she changed her major to African studies and anthropology. But then, of course, like her friend, who was the son, I believe, of a producer, music guy, introduced her to his father, and the rest is history. But it's interesting. I wonder if, in some respects, choosing music was almost like a sacrifice for Tracy. Do you know what I mean? Like becoming a musician, and a very, very famous one at that, as opposed to being a vet. So it's interesting to think, did she sacrifice her actual dreams? You know, some people, maybe she didn't want to be a musician. You never know. Well, I mean, she always would have been a musician no matter what, but maybe she had to sacrifice in some respects by allowing herself to be in the spotlight. Because obviously, with that Scorpio moon, very, very private. And she also has Pluto opposing Chiron. Now, this is quite the aspect, right? Because you have Pluto that requires like transformation and wants to fix things, right? And then you have Chiron that's all about vulnerability. And then Pluto does not want to be vulnerable at all, right? So you have these two in opposition, and that means that there needs to be some kind of compromise, some kind of blending of the two energies. So the opposition signifies absolute power to transform woundedness, Chiron, thereby achieving unprecedented empowerment. And Tracy said at one point, at this point in my life, I'd like to live as if only love mattered. Now that is perfect, right? For Pluto opposing Chiron, because it's a very, very, very tough aspect. And there needs to be a certain degree of like surrender with strength. Like you have to be strong to surrender and to really feel those emotions and to purge those and to transform them into something more. And really the key to all of that is love. All energy at its basis is love. So perhaps with Pluto opposing Chiron in Tracy's chart, she got that lesson. She got that lesson. And as she says, at this point in my life, I'd like to live as if only love mattered. And I think that if we all took that hint, oh boy, how our lives would be so much easier and so much better and so much abundant, so much more abundant. So thank you all for watching my presentation. Do you have any questions at all? Oh, this is a quote we're going to get. Thank you, Tracy Chapman Online. I'm so excited that you're here again. Thank you for coming. We're going to get a quote from her. Any questions that you have about Tracy or her chart? I'll answer whatever I can about her chart. I'm not, I know a lot about Tracy, but this is what she said. I was studying biology and thinking that was what I was going to do. Things took a different course. I actually started taking classes that led to a degree in anthropology, and then I kept playing. Thank you, Tracy Chapman Online. That makes perfect sense, right? With this North Node. The native's mission often requires making a sacrifice. The ego must be submerged to achieve something greater. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that, Tracy Chapman Online. I appreciate it. So any questions or anything else you want to talk about in regard to Tracy? I hope you listen to her this weekend. She's great. And if you don't have any questions, well, I'd love to hear what some of your favorite Tracy songs are. I have to say, my favorite Tracy song is I Did It All. I Did It All. I think that's my favorite Tracy song for today. Oh, look here. Okay, so here is an extract from an interview she gave in 2000. Reporter, does she read her horoscope? Tracy, no. Reporter, what's her sign? Tracy, Aries. I love that. Thank you. That is great. Reporter, I groan and tell her I just broke up with an Aries. I proceed to badmouth the sign, listing every negative attribute I've ever read about Aries the Ram. Tracy, you see why I don't read my horoscope? She says, laughing, and she loves to laugh. I love her laugh too. She's just, I want to say a breath of fresh air, but I don't think that Tracy's a breath of fresh air. It's almost like she makes you feel something very emotional even when she laughs. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, Tracy Chapman online. Fast Car is an amazing song. Definitely an amazing song. Have you heard I Did It All? That's my current favorite Tracy Chapman song. Definitely. She was so real. Well, Scorpio Moon will do that. And also, actually, Aries are very real. Like, they're very much themselves. And in interviews, you'll see Tracy really saying, she's like, I'm not projecting anything. I'm being me, you know? So even though she's very, very, very sweet and very, very controlled, she does have that confidence of Aries. So, but I very much appreciate you guys being with me today to talk about Tracy. Definitely listen to her. If we find her time of birth ever, who knows? Maybe we can do a redo. So this was our first episode of Musicians and Astrology, and I do appreciate you joining. Definitely check out the next one, which will be in 2 weeks from today. How is Robert Smith a Taurus? Robert Smith of The Cure. That should be interesting. So maybe get some eyeliner for August 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And the link to that is actually in the description if you want to set a reminder for yourself and you like The Cure or you like Robert Smith or you're a Taurus or you're just curious about learning more astrology. And I also shall see you on Monday for this week astrology. We're going to talk about August 8th to August 14th. When's your birthday, Sin? Your birthday's the 19th, I thought. Maybe oh, yes, it is. Okay, so we're going to be celebrating your birthday on the day we're going to be doing Robert Smith. Very, very cool. August 19th. Very awesome. Also, if you are looking for an astrology or tarot reading, well, I can do that for you. Just check out my website, psychicsun.com. We'll read your chart, talk about your blueprint and what's going on in your chart and how you can make the most of the current aspects. And we'll also read your tarot cards. So you can check out psychicsun.com. The link to that is in the description below, along with my socials. And yeah. That was fun for me too. Thank you so much for joining me, Tracy Chapman online, and everybody else. I do appreciate it. And I shall see you on Monday for this week astrology, and of course for the next episode of Musicians and Astrology on August 19th. We're going to talk about Robert Smith, The Cure. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a happy weekend. See you soon.